question that has echoed through every military gym, every barracks, every base around the world for as long as MMA has existed. Could a Special Forces soldier, the most physically elite, mentally hardened, battle-tested human beings on Earth, beat a professional MMA fighter? These are men who run 40 miles in full kit before breakfast. Men who have survived the most brutal selection processes in sport or war. Men trained to operate in life or death situations where hesitation means death. Surely, if anyone outside a professional fighting camp could handle themselves against a UFC champion, it's a Special Forces solider, right? Turns out, they can't. Here are the times when the most dangerous men in the military stepped up to professional fighters and found out exactly where they stood. Before we get into it, a quick and important distinction. This is not about disrespecting soldiers or Special Forces operators. The men in these stories are genuinely elite. They have done things that most people cannot imagine. Their courage, their sacrifice, and their service are beyond question. But here's what these stories reveal. There is a difference between being built to survive a war and being built to fight a professional. Military combat training and professional MMA training are two completely different things. One prepares you to operate under enemy fire in austere environments. The other prepares you to destroy a trained opponent in single combat. The soldiers in these stories thought they were the same thing, or even that they were tougher. They weren't. June 2008, Afghanistan. A tiny, heavily armed outpost on top of a mountain in an active war zone. 4 UFC fighters Carlos Condit, Michael Bisping, BJ Penn, and Urijah Faber have flown out to visit the troops. They meet some of the most hardcore Special Forces operators in the US military. Men who are genuinely living in a war. They have a small gym set up on the base, and in that gym there is a boxing ring. Naturally, someone suggests sparring. Bisping goes first. He and a soldier exchange jabs, keep it light, mutual respect, everyone goes home happy. Then a soldier looks at Carlos Condit and says, "Do you want to spar?" Now, some context on Carlos Condit. His nickname is the Natural-Born Killer. He holds wins over Nick Diaz, Dan Hardy, and Rory MacDonald. He went 46 professional fights without ever being knocked out. The man has a chin carved from something not found in nature and combinations so crisp they arrive like punctuation in a sentence you didn't see coming. The soldier asks how hard Condit wants to go. Condit replied, "It's up to you, man. Hit me as hard as you want to get hit." That answer, Bisping later noted on his podcast, was one of the coolest things he had ever heard a fighter say. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't bravado. It was just a mirror, held up calmly, reflecting the soldier's own intentions back at him. If you want this to be friendly, it will be friendly. If you want this to be real, it will be real. The soldier chose real. According to Bisping, all of a sudden, right then and there, this Special Forces guy, bang, sucker punches him as hard as he can. And I mean a effing hard shot. The entire room, machine guns included, went quiet. Condit shook his head, got his bearing, and then, with the calmness of a man who has been hit hard before and long since stopped being surprised by it, walked forward and threw a jab, a right hand, and a left head kick. The head kick connected. The Special Forces soldier went through the ropes and hit the floor, unconscious. Bisping's response to the room, "Oh, Carlos, I'm not sure if that was the smartest thing to do. For F's sake, I don't want to die up here." They made it off the mountain, luckily. Maybe the soldiers were a bit shaken after that one. The lesson, asking a UFC fighter to hit you as hard as you hit them is not going to end well for anyone. This one is different from the others, because in this story the fighter is on the wrong end. Tim Kennedy is one of the most uniquely credentialed men in the history of MMA, a professional fighter who simultaneously served in the US Special Forces. He competed in the UFC while deployed. He has wins over Michael Bisping and Robbie Lawler. He served as an Army Ranger and completed the Special Forces qualification course. By any measure, he is the real deal on both sides of this equation. And yet, according to retired Sergeant Major John McPhee, known in the Special Forces community as the Sheriff of Baghdad, Kennedy's incessant talking about how he could beat up everyone in his unit eventually got old. Kennedy was new to the unit, and he could not stop telling everyone with the enthusiasm of a man who had spent years professionally fighting that he could take any of them in a fight. McPhee's response, "You're gonna kick all of our asses? Meet me at the dojo at midnight." Every operator in the unit showed up. And then McPhee organized something that is genuinely one of the most cinematic things to ever happen in a military barracks. They lined up in order of rank. The junior guys went first. Kennedy, who to his enormous credit is an actual professional MMA fighter, handled himself through 2, 3, 4 opponents. He was doing well, but as McPhee put it, he couldn't beat us all. McPhee went second to last. The captain went last. By the time McPhee stepped in, Kennedy had already fought through a queue of elite special forces operators. McPhee said simply, "I just made sure in the time I had bloodied him up and made sure he was down." Me and the guys walked out and left him in there laying on the ground. They turned off the lights and left him on the dojo floor. Now, this story is the curveball in today's video because technically the fighter lost. But here's the thing, he fought through 4 or 5 of them before McPhee got to him. He just ran out of gas at the end of a gauntlet that would have finished most people after round 1, and the man who finally put him down was a retired sergeant major who, by his own description, trained specifically to be the last man standing in exactly this kind of situation. 2 professions, both dangerous, both elite. One just happened to have more men in the room. This one is not a story about Khabib Nurmagomedov fighting a soldier. It's a story about what made Khabib Nurmagomedov into something soldiers couldn't handle. To understand why Khabib went 29 fights without losing, why the most elite combat athletes in the world could not take him down, hold him down, or submit him, you have to understand where he came from. And where he came from makes everything else make sense. Khabib Abdulmanapovich Nurmagomedov was born in the village of Sildi, in the Republic of Dagestan, a region of Russia where wrestling is not a sport. It is a cultural inheritance, passed from father to son the way other cultures pass language. His father, Abdulmanap, was a military veteran, a decorated athlete, and a sambo coach who turned the ground floor of their 2-story home into a gym. And he believed, deeply and without compromise, that his son's character needed to be tested beyond anything a training session could provide. On a September morning in 1997, Abdulmanap led 9-year-old Khabib to the edge of a forest, where a bear cub was chained to a tree. He turned on a camera and told his son to wrestle it. Khabib, 9 years old, already trained in wrestling by his father, tucked his chin, dropped his level, and shot for a double leg on a bear. The bear, having considerably more mass, took him down twice. Khabib took the bear down once in return. When Khabib told his father that the bear had tried to bite him, Abdulmanap's response was simply bite him back. "No problem, you have to wrestle." He went on to become the undefeated UFC lightweight champion of the world with a record of 29-0. His takedown accuracy and ground control were so complete, so systematic that world-class wrestlers, Olympians, NCAA champions, men who had spent their entire lives doing nothing else couldn't escape him once he had position. Now, there's a concept in BJJ and grappling called crushing pressure, the idea of using your body weight and positioning as a weapon, distributing force so precisely across an opponent's frame that they burn through their energy reserves just trying to survive, let alone escape. Khabib didn't learn that in a gym. He learned it at 9 years old, in a forest in Dagestan, from a bear who outweighed him by 50 pounds. Think about the soldier in the Condit story. Think about the gauntlet in the Kennedy story. And then think about the man who, as a child, was told to bite back when a bear tried to bite him. There are levels to this. Here is the pattern you will find in every single one of these stories. The soldier walks in confident, and that confidence is not irrational. These are genuinely extraordinary human beings. They have endured things that would end most people. Their threshold for pain, for pressure, for adversity is genuinely elite. But there is a difference, a specific technical, ruthless difference between being hardened by war and being trained for single combat at the highest level. As one former Navy SEAL and Army Ranger put it, being an elite soldier does not make someone an elite fighter. These 10+ to be UFC fighters could defeat me fairly easily, even though often I had 25-40 pounds of healthy mass and similar athletic gifts. The Special Forces guys were capable but greatly outmatched. The soldier who sucker-punched Carlos Condit, a man trained to operate in an actual war zone, found out that being able to throw a hard punch means nothing if your opponent has been getting hit hard for a decade and has already planned the next 4 things he's going to do when it lands. Tim Kennedy's unit, a room full of some of the most highly trained operators in the U.S. military, had to form an actual queue just to eventually put one professional MMA fighter on the floor. And Khabib Nurmagomedov, the most dominant combat athlete of his generation, was built in a world so far beyond military training that the military's training looked like the warm-up. There is a hierarchy. It is uncomfortable. It is not about courage or toughness or will. It is purely technical. And the next time someone in a military gym asks a professional fighter how hard they want to spar, they should remember what Carlos Condit said. It's up to you, man. Hit me as hard as you want to get hit, and mean it with the full understanding of what that offer actually entails.